Does helicopter parenting display a healthy parenting style, or does it really reveal deeper-seated issues within the parent? Is that parent mentally healthy, or does that parent have some trauma that is unresolved and that they're projecting externally? I'm Carrie Blazer, the Divine Feminine. My soul's name is Sophia, and I have a free ebook below. My 6 Divine Feminine Self-Love Strategies will teach you how to transform your emotional wounds into personal wisdom, and you can expand your emotional range to include enlightenment. Please like and subscribe to my channel. Help me blow up my channel so I can distribute this free ebook, so together we can learn how self-love creates heaven on earth. But let's get back to parenting, and we're going to start with Dr. Gabor Mate. He's a family medicine practitioner who specializes in how childhood trauma impacts adults. And in this short, he shows the connection, the 2 things that children need. They need healthy attachment, and they need healthy authenticity. They need the capacity to express their emotions in healthy ways. But what happens when children do not go through that process, do not individuate into healthy, emotionally mature adults who are capable of civil discourse? Well, then we're going to get into the helicopter parent. All right, but let's start with Dr. Gabor Mate, because he really sets the scene for us to have this deeper discussion about attachment and the capacity to express ourselves authentically, which creates a healthy, emotionally mature adult.
What happens to a child where the attachment need is not compatible with the need for authenticity? In other words, if I'm authentic, my parents will reject me. If I feel what I feel and express what I feel and insist on my own truth, my parents can't handle it. And parents convey those messages unconsciously all the time. Not because they mean to, not because they don't love the child, not because they're not trying to do their best, but because they themselves are suppressed or traumatized or hurt or stressed. And what does the child do with that? Well, if I give up my attachment for the sake of authenticity, I lose my relationships on which my life depends. Therefore, there's no question. What becomes suppressed is our authenticity, our emotions. And then we become 25 and 30 or 35, 40, and we don't know who we are.
Do you know anyone like that who's gotten to their 20s or 30s or 40s and they're still figuring out who they are? And would those be the same people who are helicopter parents, pushing their child to fulfill their own dreams as opposed to being able to be present for their child's own dreams? And this is where I get to this question. Do adults have a right to children, or do children have a right to healthy adults? And which right is more important for creating a healthy society? Now, I'm going to argue the latter, that because children are the most vulnerable, they have the most rights. But when parents have a right to children, then you're going to see parents not holding boundaries with themselves because they're busy controlling their child, and trying to get their child to meet their own unfulfilled dreams. And so we're going to do a deeper dive into that with Erica Komisar, who's a licensed clinical social worker. And that's our next video. And she gets into helicopter parenting and how helicopter parents will oftentimes expect infants to be more mature because the adult has a right to children as opposed to the child having a right to the adult. And then when they get older in their teenage years, then the parents are busy making them infants because all of that is about control. Well, did you know that we live in a holographic universe proved by the laws of physics? That the universe is a mirror showing us ourselves in every moment as a constant feedback loop for self-improvement? After we get into this video with Erica Komisar, I'm going to bring up Dr. Carl Jung, and we're going to do a deep dive into psychology, the cardiology, our hearts are a vortex, and we're going to learn how this all operates, and we're going to draw on the laws of physics too, so that we can all understand how we can create heaven on earth together. by loving ourselves and projecting love out of our hearts. That's why I share that free ebook below, to teach everyone how to transform their emotional wounds into personal wisdom, so that what comes out of everyone's hearts is love, compassion, and enlightenment, instead of fear, guilt, and shame. And that's what we're going to see is true for these helicopter parents. So let's get to that.
So let's talk about the term helicopter parenting, which is an overused term, but it's really not a present parent. It's an anxious parent. And sometimes it's an aggressive and intrusive parent.
Yeah, the people yelling at the side of the Little League game going
So
nuts.
that's not being there any more than being there. I mean, in other words, if you're not there at all and you're there intrusively, it can be experienced by children in the same way as you not being there. So
it's like, I don't want you here.
I have a theory. I'll share my theory with you, is that we have reversed things. This is how I think about it, because it's a very complicated thing, what we're talking about. It's not simple and it's nuanced. So we have adultomorphized young children, and then we have turned slightly older children into infants. We've reversed.
This reversal is really important to understanding transforming emotional wounds into personal wisdom, and that's why I'm stepping in here. And here's an example. I had a very traumatic childhood. I was raped. And what I only understood 4 years ago is one of the ways I internalized that was in my subconscious, in my shadow. I had a wound, fear all men. And that made me super anxious in society. And I displayed that all the time. The day after I found that wound and I turned it into men protect me, which is wisdom, because in general, men protect women. Sure, there's some men that are dangerous, but not all men. I went outside and my daughter noticed immediately, because I used to spend every weekend with her at market selling her jewelry that she handmade. So she knew exactly how I was in public. She said, Mom, what's up? Mom, you're different. You're so much better. You're not anxious. Immediately she knew. And I'm like, yeah, I told her what happened. I walked around. I was fine. So when I did that internal work, I immediately established a different relationship with my daughter. Changing the world is an inside job.
We want to treat our infants as infants and
really
be there.
this.
And then we want to start incrementally letting our children explore. It's not any different than when they're little. If you go to nursery school or you go to the playground and you hover over them, that's not being present. Being present is space. It's giving them space. It's being there if they need you, if they're in distress, smiling at them so they know that you have faith that they can play and that they'll be okay. You know, the glass floor experiment. Years ago, there was an experiment where a mother was on one side of a glass floor with a big precipice underneath, a clear glass floor. The baby's on the other side. If the mother looked at the baby with a smile and faith in that baby, the baby toddled over the glass floor, which is a very scary glass floor, right? You know, objectively. But if the mother looked at the baby with anxiety, that baby broke down and cried and could not cross that floor. So the concept is being in the playground and looking at your child slightly from afar with some space and say, go ahead, it's okay. You're okay. And even letting them fall down every once in a while. But when they do, you meet their distress. You go and comfort them and soothe them. That's being present. Hovering over them is not being present. So in a way, we treat them as little old men and old women when they're little, and then we infantilize them when they're older. We have to reverse it.
So we're going to get to a Carl Jung quote about projection. And when we're unconscious that we're constantly projecting our shadow so that we can see ourselves through a process of morphic resonance, we attract what we are through energetic resonance, meaning a vibrational match. That's why we live in a holographic universe. But we don't understand that, and we think that we have to control people outside of us to get them to behave, and that it's an external locus of control. This is when we get into these challenges. When the parent has a right to the child. When the parent's rights, when the less vulnerable party perceives his or her rights as more important than the child, this is when we get into problems of abuse and control. But when the most vulnerable's rights are prioritized, then that sets us up for a healthy alignment to understand what are our appropriate roles here. Whose rights are more important? And when we prioritize the children's rights for a healthy parent, does that create a healthier society? I argue that it does, but I'd really like you to do a deep dive on your own.
If we want to get this thing right, which is letting them have, as you say, circles of exploration, is how they grow.
So let's talk now about this next phase, which is graduating high school, but you're still technically adolescent, I guess.
Yeah, you are.
So this is the phase my son is entering into. He's 18.
Yeah.
And out into 25. So that's college. That's the start of your career, maybe in that order, or maybe one or the other. What is happening psychologically and neurologically in that phase? And then we can talk about what do we as parents do.
Well, they're breaking down when they leave home. And a lot of that.
What does that mean when you say they're breaking down?
Oh, literally, they're having mental breakdowns. They're getting so depressed or anxious or suicidal.
So are you saying you're describing what's happening, not what should happen?
Yes, that's what's happening. Definitely not what should happen, but it is what's happening. They've come out of what didn't used to be a stressful period. And I can just use myself. I'm almost 60 years old. And when I was in high school, it was not stressful. I think I took the SAT once. I didn't do great on it. Oh, well, I got into whatever college I got into. I had a bunch of B's and B minuses. I think I even had a C on my report card. I played a lot.
You could be like the Nathan Fielder opening sequence. I graduated from a school with pretty good grades.
Pretty good grades. That's right. So
A minus B.
I mean, because high school was meant to be a time of balance. And I went to college and I discovered my academic, affinity when I got to college. And I even transferred to a better college. And so it wasn't really a pressured experience. I didn't come from a pressured experience. I didn't go into a pressured experience. I just had experiences. And that's what it used to be. It's not like that anymore. Because what we've done is, again, in treating young children as adults, we've pressured them at a very young age to be accomplished. We've given them a sense of the future and their future selves before they're ready to see their future selves. I wasn't ready to look at my future self or worry about meaningful work when I was in high school. I couldn't have dealt with the pressure of taking exams 5 times to get perfect scores so I could get into the perfect school. We're basically teaching them from a very young age that they have to have resumes.
Yes, we're teaching and modeling external perfectionism. And what I've noticed that when my heart is closed and my brain is overactive, that's when I seek to be same like everybody else and perfect like everybody else. But when I open my heart to my own soul's purpose and didn't stop my overactive brain, then I stop comparing myself to everybody else. But when I have an external locus of control, like the Christian worldview that, fear God and I'm subservient and I have to, be in this image that's being shown to me. Like as a woman in Western society, I have to get a college degree. I have to have a husband. I have to have kids. I have to do that all perfectly with no help from my family. Well, that's not living in reality. That's not logical. That's not how a healthy family is created. A healthy family and children are created when we have an emotional center at home. When women are the emotional center, that's what we're physiologically designed to do. Our nervous system is far more robust than men, so we can stay in our emotions and process our emotions and teach the family how to do that. But when we teach women that it's more important to have a career than to be a healthy homemaker, then we have no one at home doing the healthy emotional intimacy where mental health is created and sustained. We've kind of said mental health isn't important because money's more important. So this is what happens when we put money and convenience before health and well-being. And then we have adults who never truly grew up and matured. And so because the adults have never fully matured, they aren't fully matured parents. And then we get the helicopter parent coming out of that, who can't detach from themselves in a healthy way and then model that for their kids. When I was over-attached to myself, I was over-attached to my kids because that's what I was projecting out of my heart. Over-attachment, over-anxious, over depressed, too much fear, too much guilt, too much shame. And so I was hanging on to it because I didn't know how to release it. And because the universe is a mirror and we project who we are out through the vortex of our hearts. Yes, a literal vortex in our hearts so that we can see ourselves. We live in a holographic universe. And until everyone learns that we live in a holographic universe, people are going to continue to blame other people for their problems. And I used to blame my kids for my problems because I was an immature adult. I had not grown up from my traumatic childhood. I never individuated. I was never able to express myself authentically like I can now. Now I'm individuated because I can express myself authentically. But without that capacity, children don't individuate and they're constantly under their parents' shelter up into adults, and then they don't mature. This is the problem we're having right now.
Have to have internships and they have to have perfect scores and perfect grades, or they're not going to get into a good college. They're not going to get a good job. They're not going to have a good life. I mean, this is parental anxiety.
Yeah. 100%.
And this is educational, institutional anxiety. So we are causing our children's anxiety. I go back to where's it coming from? It is not innate in these children. We are indoctrinating them into a system that is not working. And I don't know when someone's going to pull the plug on it.
What do we understand right now about what is happening? What is happening, not socially as a diagnosis of our problems, but in naturally, like in their brains from 18 to 25. And what does healthy look like?
So remember I said that middle adolescence was very present oriented. 18 to 25 is when they start to be able to envision the future. But it's just the beginning. It's like just the beginning of being able to look into the future and say, maybe I could be a ballerina. Maybe I could be, an accountant. Maybe I could be a fireman. Maybe, it's just the beginning. But what we're doing to them is we're making them declare, right? You're going to be a doctor. You're going to get on a pre-med path. And their brains can't cope with the stress. That's what's happening. We are imposing so much stress on their developing brains that they can't take it. You could call it short circuiting is what's happening to them. And so they're turning to things like alcohol and drugs with it. That's another piece of it. The potency of drugs is, THC levels in cannabis in my generation were 2 to 4%. So it wasn't addictive. It wasn't poisonous. It wasn't, you didn't have breakdowns from it.
It didn't induce psychopathy or whatever.
Or depersonalization. So what's happening is because they're so stressed, they're turning to drugs.
So that's a kind of self-medication, isn't it?
It is self-medication. They're turning to drugs even more than alcohol. Alcohol is also a problem, but drugs have become...
Is that statistically true? I thought Gen Z was sort of down on all the sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Okay, I'm going to link this below so you guys can all watch the full episode and look up other videos by Erica Komisar. She's just brilliant when it comes to maternal fetal bonding. But I want to, keep going on this front. I had a traumatic childhood. I was not healed when I had my children. And so I did not know how to teach my children how to surf the waves of life, how to process their emotions in a healthy way. All I knew how to do was hang on to my fear, guilt, and shame. And I modeled that to my kids. And so that's what they learned how to do. So let's talk more about how this all functions, which is my favorite part. And what I had to accept is that an Einstein quote applies here. The field is the sole governing agency of the particle. The field meaning the energy field, the particle meaning the body, and the whole scientific field of epigenetics, epi meaning before genetics, proves that this is true. And so I want to start with how this works. So the field, how does it come out of us? So we have our soul and it communicates out through our hearts, heart and soul. And the nervous system in our hearts is far more complex than our brains. And the heart sends far more signals to our brains than the other way around. So when I think of hamburgers, what comes out through my heart is hunger. And so that communicates to my brain, and then my mouth salivates, whether hamburgers are here or not. So if I have unhealed trauma from my childhood, and in my soul I have those memories that I haven't processed through, there's lots of fear, guilt, and shame, that keeps coming out of me unconsciously because my soul is attempting to show me myself. But I didn't know how to listen. I didn't know that we live in a holographic universe. So the nervous system in our hearts is far more complex than our brains, and our hearts send far more signals to our brains than the other way around. So how can we change the heart signals to more love, compassion, and enlightenment? Oh, that's when we have to get into the wounds inside of our soul. That's what my free ebook does. But I want to do a little bit deeper dive here so we really understand how this works. And let's start with Carl Jung. Here is, I'm going to share a quote in my book from Carl Jung. And here it is. Oh, let me move this. Okay. So I was raped as in my childhood. And in order to see myself, my wounds, I attracted several men into my life over the past about 6 years. I haven't been on a date with any of these men, and they're all in my book, but these men mirrored my wounds back to me, two of them being Justin Waller and his best friend, Andrew Tate. I had a personal relationship with Justin. I started over DM on Instagram. We started chit-chatting in June of 2022, 2 months before Andrew's takedown started. And I put this quote here about projection because so much is projected onto Andrew Tate. But really, I'm encouraging you, if you are triggered by Justin Waller or if you're triggered by Andrew Tate, then use this wisdom to help you see yourself. What irritates you about others leads you to an understanding of yourself. That's Carl Jung. And my quote is, triggers are my healing friend and not my healing foe, because when I'm triggered, my emotional pain is at the surface. It's a perfect time for me to dive into the first lesson in my free ebook, Appreciate, Learn, Forgive. Appreciate your challenge. That's the emotional pain. Then go into learning, why was this event necessary in my life? Like I attempted suicide. I can ask myself, why was the suicide necessary in my life for me to see myself? Why was a rape necessary in my life for me to see myself? We're souls having a human experience, and we live in a holographic universe. So in order to see our soul is projected externally out through our hearts onto the quantum field, and what we resonate with, what draws our attention, who we attract into our lives is what shows us ourselves. So let's read Carl Jung. If you imagine someone who is brave enough to withdraw all of his projections, then you might get an individual who is conscious of a pretty thick shadow. Such a man has saddled himself with new problems and conflicts. He has become a serious problem to himself, as he is now unable to say, they do this and they do that. They are wrong and they must be fought against. Such a man knows that whatever is wrong with the world is in himself. And if he only learns to deal with his own shadow, he has done something real for the world. He has succeeded in shouldering at least an infinitesimal part of the gigantic unsolved social problems of our day. I mean, Christianity teaches love thy enemy. This is why. Because we live in a holographic universe. How do we create heaven? If we're living in a holographic universe, how can heaven be elsewhere? In a holographic universe, heaven is a frequency in our hearts that we project externally so that we can experience it. That's why I teach that self-love creates heaven on earth. All right, let's do a little bit more into how the universe is a mirror based on the laws of physics. Let me bring up a different slide in my presentation here. Here we go. Okay, so on the left, we have the map of consciousness. And the map of consciousness by Dr. David R. Hawkins shows that each emotion expressed by our souls, as I explained, our energy body or our souls are expressed out through our hearts. We'll see a video about that in a second. And then our hearts send the signal, communicate the signal up to the brain, then the brain releases the right chemical. So when fear comes out through the heart and fear is communicated to the brain, cortisol is released. And when cortisol is constantly being released, like in my situation, cortisol raises the blood sugar in the blood and keeps it there. And then that's when people crave sugar, and that drives inflammation. Additionally, cancer, viruses, and bacteria all vibrate below 100 hertz. So I used to get sick all the time. I almost died of bacterial pneumonia when I was 30 years old, right after I gave birth to my second child. She was 5 weeks old. Because I spent so much time down here in fear, guilt, and shame, that was my body mirroring the wounds in my soul back to me, but I didn't know how to listen. But since I've been healing over the past 6 years, I've been healing for 10 years, but the past 6, I haven't gotten sick. Because I spend so much more time in courage, 200 hertz, love, 500 hertz, enlightenment, 700 to 1,000 hertz. And I'm in and out of enlightenment on a weekly basis, at least once, sometimes daily. So I'm not getting sick. I don't attract it into my life to show me myself. The universe is a mirror showing me myself, and every moment is a constant feedback loop for self-improvement. So let's watch this laws of physics experiment. And first, we're going to see 2 tuning forks. One is 512 and one is 440. And we're going to see that they don't influence each other. They don't even perceive each other's existence. But when you have 440 next to 440, then when one 440 moves, the other 440 moves. So, for example, if I have 40 hertz in my soul, and that's selfishness, when that part of my soul moves, that will trigger the 40 hertz in other people's souls, showing me myself, showing me my tribe, my identity. And that's how you get stuck in an echo chamber, because it feels right that part of me is moving. But when we understand that we live in a holographic universe, that when I perceive selfishness outside of me, that's my soul showing me my own selfishness. When I perceive beauty outside of me, that is my soul showing me my own beauty. It goes both ways. But let's watch this physics experiment to see it working in real time. And this is why changing the world is an inside job, because when you change how your soul is vibrating, then what you perceive in the world, what you're attracted to, what's attracted to you, changes. I mean, how many women have you heard say, why are all men narcissists? Okay, girlfriend, all the men you attract are narcissists. You're the common denominator here. But when you change the common denominator, then you change what you attract. That's how we see ourselves. So now I want to share how the heart is physically a vortex. And we're going to really lean on a Tesla quote that's also in my book. If you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And afterwards, we're going to see a video about how hearts are formed in the embryo, and how in the embryo, blood flows before the heart is formed. Like Einstein said, the field is the sole governing agency of the particle. The energy field controls the particle. The energy field controls the blood, not the heart. When we understand that we live in a holographic universe, the internal locus of control comes into direct focus. And that's how we hold ourselves accountable to our best selves. Let's see how this works. Okay. Oh, here we go.
Let me just read this, because I think it's actually probably one of the best descriptions of the heart that I've ever run across. They taught you the heart was just a glorified meat pump, that it squeezes and pushes blood like some crude mechanical device, a hydraulic engine made of flesh. That is what they want you to believe, because if you buy into that primitive lie, you never ask deeper questions. But it is false. It has always been false. And the real science proves it. Dr. Francesco Torrenguas, a Spanish cardiac researcher, discovered what the textbooks refuse to acknowledge, that the heart is not a pump. He dissected thousands of hearts and found that the heart is a single continuous muscle band folded into a spiral. He proved that the heart works like a vortex generator, creating suction and torque, not pressure. He called it the helical ventricular myocardial band, and it changes everything. The real movement of the blood comes from pressure differentials, electromagnetic flow, and coherent resonance. The blood spirals naturally. It need not be forced through miles of arteries and capillaries. The so-called pump is not strong enough to push thick fluid through 60,000 miles of tubing. That is basic physics. That lie was dead on arrival. Here is the truth. Blood moves before the heart forms in the embryo. That is, by the way, a documented fact. It flows via frequency, resonance, and electric charge. The body is a field, not a factory. Your heart creates a toroidal electromagnetic field that radiates 6 meters from the body. This field syncs with the earth, the sun, and every living being around you. It is a resonator, a tuner, a conductor. It aligns the rhythm of your cells. It feels, it remembers, it emits, and it responds to emotion, thought, light, sound, and breath. When you feel love, grief, fear, or peace, your heart transmits it. It is the central frequency modulator of your biology, not a pump. And the institutions know this. The Heart Math Institute has measured these fields for decades. They know the heart has more neuronal cells than parts of the brain. They know it is a second brain. They know coherence in the heart transforms the entire nervous system. So why are they?
Okay, I will put that one linked below. And now we're going to do the last one. This is my favorite. See how a heart is formed in an embryo. And it's beautiful. Before the heart beats for the first time, something far greater begins to move. Long before your heart ever beat, thousands of cardiac cells made a silent decision. There was no pulse, no rhythm, no sound. In the earliest stages of development, individual heart cells begin firing electrical signals on their own. Then something remarkable happens. They synchronize. Separate impulses align into one coordinated electrical wave. That wave triggers the first contraction, the first heartbeat, the beginning of a rhythm that can last a lifetime. I will leave you there with Changing the World as an Inside Job. That's one of my teachings in my free ebook linked below. I hope you check it out. Thank you for listening today, and I hope you take some time to self-reflect on do adults have a right to children? Do the less vulnerable, are the rights of the less vulnerable more important than the vulnerable? Or do children have a right to adults? In which way do we make a healthy, well-adjusted society full of adults capable of civil discourse, who have a healthy respect for our federal government and adults? Okay, let's think about it. Take care. Bye.